Welcome to a very special brand new Mandela Effects episode, because today we're talking about history changing. This episode is going to be extremely weird, very different, but super interesting. You're gonna love it, so let's get right into it. Solar panels first came out in the 1950s. Except now that isn't the case. The first solar panel was actually created in the 1800s, and was even installed on a New York City rooftop. And speaking of solar-powered things, apparently some ships that went on long voyages across the sea had sunlight-powered ovens dating back to, get this, the 1700s. Sure, why not? What about electric cars? This seems like a new enough concept. Well, what if I told you that it's actually really old? In fact, the first electric car debuted all the way back in 1890 in the United States. Not only that, apparently electric cars from a bunch of different automakers popped up all across the country. New York City even had an entire fleet of 60 electric taxis. By the year 1900, electric cars accounted for 1/3 of all vehicles on the road in the United States. And over the next 10 years, the sales of electric cars kept growing. This definitely sounds like the history you learned growing up, right? Electricity didn't have all the issues that steam or gas cars did. They were easy to drive with no smelly pollutant. Apparently, the electric car over 100 years ago was extremely popular and even led to the first hybrid car. That's right, both gas and electric back in 1899. 1899 was the first hybrid electric gasoline-powered car. To blow your mind even more, even Edison believed that electric cars were the superior technology. But what if I told you that history was a little different now? It was ultimately Henry Ford's mass-produced cheaper Model T car that seemingly killed the electric car, and thus the considerably more toxic and inefficient gas-powered cars became the standard. It all came down to price. The point I'm getting at is that today, as in modern times, is the most obvious moment affected by the Mandela effect. When something changes today, it's right in our face. Anyone can see it and talk about it. But what fascinates me more is when history is potentially changed by the Mandela effect. Things you thought you knew? Not anymore. Things that seemingly never existed? Well, now they did. History is the recorded record of what happened, at least to the best of our knowledge. So I understand some things changing over time as we learn more. That makes perfect sense. But a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today, it almost seems unreal, like an alternative history. So let's continue with more examples. The word smallpox probably doesn't mean much to younger people today. It's an old disease that was completely eradicated by 1980, thanks to a vaccine created in 1796. But did you know that it was one of the deadliest viruses to ever spread throughout humanity? Over 500 million recorded deaths. And that's since we've been record keeping. It's probably considerably more than that. In fact, one epidemic in Japan between 735 and 737 was believed to have killed off an entire third of their population. Smallpox is no joke. They speculate that smallpox first made the jump to humans over 3,000 years ago, as there are even Egyptian mummies who died of smallpox. But as history and the Mandela effect go, obviously something has to change. As I mentioned earlier, the smallpox vaccine was created in 1796. Except now it was being used 30 plus years earlier when George Washington and Congress carried out a mass vaccination campaign in the Continental Army that reduced the mortality from smallpox to less than 2%, from what was 50%. Let's say 2 people got it, 1 person was pretty much guaranteed to die, to now being 50 people could get it and only 1 person would die. It was this overwhelming massive success that somehow the history books forgot to mention until now. And get this, inoculations and vaccines for smallpox date back somehow even further than that. Examples range from the early 1700s all the way back to the 1500s in China. Let's check out some more potential Mandela effect examples. We all hopefully know of the space race between what is modern-day Russia and the United States of America from back in the 1960s. Perhaps you've heard about Operation Paperclip from the 1940s to the 1950s. A plan to take former Nazi scientists, technicians, and engineers and put them to work for the US government. That's actually where NASA came from. Take the brightest minds of your enemies and make them work for you. Many people would probably recognize the scientifically valuable work of Wernher von Braun, the man who is credited as the father of space travel and the father of rocket science. He invented the V2 rockets and is largely credited for rocket science. So are you ready for the Mandela effect? No, you aren't. No one is. Enter the CBU manuscripts, a 450-page manuscript written in the 1500s. Yes, you heard me correctly, the 1500s, that's 1500. These CBU manuscripts contain diagrams and step-by-step instructions regarding artillery, ballistics, multi-stage rockets, meaning 2- and 3-stage rockets, You know, where the rocket separates into multiple pieces as it breaks through Earth's atmosphere? Yeah, it's talking about that, as well as manned rockets, liquid fuel, along with their complex construction instructions. Not only that, I know, how can there be more? Apparently in the 1500s, one of these rockets was even successfully tested. This is just beyond comprehension. The Mandela effect, time travel, or just lost history being rediscovered, whatever you want to call it, it's absolutely mind-blowing, and it raises so many questions. It sounds absurd, but history seems to change all the time. I know this because I've covered so many of these before. Some in my History Mandela Effects videos, and others like the Black Tom Explosion in my The Best Mandela Effect video. Check these two videos out if you haven't seen them already because they're great examples of historical changes. But I'm not done yet. I'm not done in the slightest. Today, you're getting a history overload. How about electric scooters? When do you think they came around? You probably aren't thinking 1913, are you? Because yeah, that's when it was first created. Well, what about the former science fiction turned science fact concept of video phones? You know, it's a phone call, but you can see the other person on the other side of the phone. Now we have FaceTime, Skype, and other similar apps, but for the longest time, this was the future. I used to think, oh man, when this is real, we'll know we've made it, because we're living in the future. But now that we have it, no one really wants to do it because who wants to get showered and cleaned up for a phone call? Just text me. In the 1960s, Bell System, later renamed AT&T, showed off their picture phone as a prototype at the New York City World's Fair.
Good morning, John. You're looking well this morning. I'm very pleased and proud, John, to participate with you this morning in this historic call and city of...
But that wasn't the first showing of this technology. Even though at the time, this was shown off as a brand new thing never before seen or realized. What if I told you that video phones existed, and not just in concept, but actually existed and were publicly used 87 years ago? Go ahead, take a moment to take that in. 87 years ago. Germany, 1936. The world's first two-way video phone service launched. This unbelievable historical achievement that seemingly spawned into existence was so far ahead of its time. Get this, it connected to a range of 100 miles to multiple cities in Germany and was open to the public. It ran at 25 frames per second on a CRT display at a resolution of 172 rows, which equated to about 40,000 pixels. It was said to be so detailed that you could read the hands on a wristwatch. 3-minute phone calls were priced at about 1/15 of the average German's weekly wage. Each city had a few booths, and all you had to do was make an appointment ahead of time at the post office. Then World War II came around, and their plans to extend the network were abandoned for obvious reasons. By 1940, the entire system was shut down. Now, speaking of technology and history changing seemingly overnight, let's talk about batteries. What if I told you that two longtime rivals in the battery business now have a couple extra things in common besides batteries? I'd like to assume that everyone in the US knows of the Energizer Bunny. The pink bunny mascot with a drum powered by Energizer batteries that keep going and going. This thing has been around for decades, and that's the battery bunny. Always has been, always will be. But what if I told you that the Energizer Bunny isn't actually the only battery bunny? That Duracell, Energizer's main competitor, actually has a pink bunny powered by a battery mascot as well. And get this, that bunny was created first and has been around longer than Energizer's bunny. When I first read about this, my jaw dropped. I started digging deeper into this, and it's all true, and a lot of people online are freaking out about it. Apparently Duracell created their pink bunny first in 1973, but by 1988 their trademark lapsed, so Energizer swooped in and created a parody of that pink bunny. This led to legal issues, courtroom drama, and eventually, in a settlement, Energizer got the rights to this bunny in the US and Canada, while Duracell got their rights to everywhere else in the world. Then, get this, apparently Duracell's pink bunny started creeping back into the US in 2016. More courtroom drama ensued, and now we randomly have two battery companies with a pink bunny mascot. What? Okay, why not? Why not? So what do you remember? Did Duracell always have a pink bunny mascot? Or is this completely new information to you? I've seen a ton of people online completely confused about this, and a few people who remember the bunny. So where do you stand? One could certainly try to make the case that the Duracell bunny wasn't around very long in the US, so maybe that's why so many people don't remember it. But then again, the pink Duracell bunny was used in the US for a total of 23 years. 23 years. That is a ridiculously long time to be used in marketing for how little brand recognition there actually is for it. I don't know about you, but I find this potential Mandela effect absolutely fascinating. So please, tell me what you remember. I want to hear it in the comments below. Here's another interesting one. If you've watched my channel over the past few years, you know I love a good update. So next, let's talk about something I originally covered back in Brand New Mandela Effects Part 5, the Hindenburg Explosion. So before we get into what's new, here's a clip of what I said then. The date is May 6th, 1937, Lakehurst, New Jersey. The German airship, the Hindenburg, is the largest object ever to soar through the air. While attempting to land, the massive Zeppelin caught fire and exploded. Within 30 seconds, the German airship was no more. This horrible tragedy was famously captured on film, and because of this film disaster, the age of the commercial airship travel had come to an end. Now, here is the Mandela effect. Of the 97 passengers and crew, everyone on board died that day. Within 30 seconds, the Zeppelin burnt up and crashed. There is no way anyone could have survived that fiery crash. That isn't the case now. Despite the footage agreeing with what I remember, amazingly enough, 62 of the 94 passengers and crew survived. Somehow. This horrifying disaster took the lives of 35 people, 13 passengers, 22 crewmen, and 1 member of the ground crew who was trying to help the Hindenburg land. What do you remember about this? Did everyone on board perish, or did 2/3 of the people on board mysteriously survive this blazing inferno after a massive drop? If so, how? Even on History.com, under an article titled The Hindenburg Disaster, 9 Surprising Facts, the first surprising fact to them is that the, quote, survivors of the Hindenburg disaster far outnumbered the victims. Why would that be surprising if that's exactly what happened? We would have known that news back in that day in 1937, and most a couple days afterwards. My takeaway is that even the author assigned to do that article was shocked by this historical change. Another interesting detail is that despite the Hindenburg explosion in 1937 being known by many, myself included, as history's deadliest airship accident, it is actually the 3rd deadliest now. It turns out accidents from 1930 and 1933 actually surpass the Hindenburg's current death toll. It seems that history loves to rewrite itself from time to time, and this is yet another example I've talked about on this channel. Now that you're up to date, what's new? Well, it's been recently rediscovered that there was actually another video of the disaster. A better video that shows more. I wish I was joking. Apparently people knew of it back then, but didn't use it or talk about it or anything. It just existed, people weren't interested, and that was that. Your guess is as good as mine. This footage starts off pre-disaster, and because of the camera being used, it could only record for short periods of time. Now remember this as you're watching. Of the 97 people on board, 67 somehow survived this. I'm still blown away by that. Anyway, what do you think of this newly discovered 86-year-old footage? I think it's just incredible. Imagine having this, and sitting on it, for that long. It's as if this footage just spawned into existence and everyone said, yeah, okay. This actually makes me excited for the future. I can't wait to see what newly discovered footage will pop up next. New Hiroshima footage? New 9/11 footage? How about JFK? Can we get a new video of that? Footage of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand? Or my personal favorite idea, newly discovered footage taken by a farmer of the Roswell crash. Maybe he was there on his field, he was filming crops for some reason, and he caught the whole crash on video. And everybody knew about the footage, we just all forgot about it, because why not? Why not? I just love this world we live in. Every day it's something, and we're so battered and beaten down that we don't even blink anymore. Something changes, something insane happens, it's just another day. I guess we just never noticed that before. So give me your best theory on what footage will miraculously appear next. Name the planets, moons, asteroids, and/or celestial bodies humans have sent objects to. Just think about that for a second. Obviously we get Earth, that's a free space on this bingo card. Then we have the moon, of course. Where else? Mars, yeah, we got a couple rovers there. Then there's that one asteroid that Japan was able to land 2 rovers on. That was pretty awesome. We also landed on Saturn's moon Titan. So there are plenty of interesting places humans have sent objects to. There's one upcoming mission planned for 2039 to finally land on Venus with a rover that is powered by the wind. You see, Venus is incredibly harsh. 465 degrees Celsius or 869 degrees Fahrenheit. Meaning whatever we send there, the electronics on board will fry and eventually the entire rover will melt. So the plan is to build something that can potentially survive months out there. Pretty cool, right? So you might be wondering, what's the historical Mandela effect here? What? Am I gonna tell you we've already sent an object to Venus? Yes, we apparently already have. Venera 7, a Soviet spacecraft, successfully landed on Venus in 1970. Ever heard of this before? No? Well, you're not alone. Venera 7 apparently transmitted information to Earth for 53 minutes, which included about 20 minutes from the surface. So not only do we know exactly what Venus looks like from the ground level of the planet, we've had photos and videos of it for 53 years. Look at these photos. Humans walked on the moon in 1969 and captured a bunch of photos and video. And a year later, in 1970, we acquired photos and videos of Venus. They're real, and you're looking at them right now. Sure, why not? Next thing you know, we'll have already landed on another planet, and somehow everyone will have forgotten about that as well. I'm calling it now. Continuing on our journey through history and its seemingly ever-changing self, next up we have werewolf trials. That's right, over 200 years before the Salem witch trials in America, Europe was having werewolf trials. I asked every single friend I knew about this, and not a single one of them had any idea this was a thing. So I went online, and guess what? Same exact thing. So now I'm throwing it out there for all of you to comment and respond on. To start, obviously there aren't werewolves. But that didn't stop humans from falsely accusing, kidnapping, torturing, and killing other humans because they thought they were werewolves. I'm so glad that hundreds of years later, we don't just single out people today for being different and try to eradicate them and their beliefs. Oh. These trials took place throughout the 15th, 16th, and 17th century. And here's a cause you've probably never heard of before. These trials and horrific life-ending punishments were driven by superstition, religion, politics, and the desire to find scapegoats for the harsh conditions of their time. Sound familiar? Many of the accused were beggars, hermits, foreigners, immigrants, and people that were simply different. Absolutely horrifying stuff, and it's terrifying to me that we still have the same thing going on today. But instead of werewolves, it's fill in the blank. On a much lighter and less political note, let's talk about toilets. Flushing toilets, to be exact. When was the first flushing toilet created? History tells us that the first modern flushable toilet is credited to Sir John Harington, an Englishman in 1596. That's 427 years ago. Now, previous to this, there existed ancient toilets, but they simply utilized running water and not a flush. Just imagine a stream of water underneath you. That's basically the idea. But here we go again. History has changed once more. Archaeologists have discovered a flush toilet in China. The mind-blowing part is that it doesn't just beat the 427-year record. It blows it out of the water, pun intended. This flush toilet is 2,400 years old. Absolutely amazing stuff. Before we get to the final Mandela effect of today's video, please subscribe to all three of my channels, All Time 2, and All Time Clips. All links are in the description, go check them out. I'd also like to say that in the next brand new Mandela effects video, I'll be returning to the standard format of previous episodes. So if you didn't like this, no worries, I'm just having fun with the format. We're all just having fun here. We're mixing things up, keeping things fresh. So let's get into our final segment. Let's talk about Japan. Here is an absolutely insane Mandela effect for you. Japan has just discovered 7,000 new unknown islands. Yes, 7,000 new islands that have seemingly come into existence out of nowhere. You heard me correctly, 7,000 new islands. Apparently back in 1987, the Japanese Coast Guard counted up the total islands of Japan. The way the islands were counted was that each had to have a circumference of at least 100 meters, so about 328 feet. The grand total tallied up to 6,852 islands, meaning Japan had less than 7,000 islands. But now, all of those, plus another extra 7,000 islands they just never noticed before, meaning the total amount of islands making up Japan has more than doubled. Now, I'm sure some of these islands might not have previously been counted, or perhaps errors occurred, but 7,000 new ones? 7,000 brand new undiscovered islands? That's just beyond belief. How is that even possible? I got a comment the other day thanking my team for all the hard work on these videos, and I realized something. People think I have a team. Now, that's pretty cool. It makes it seem like this production of mine isn't a one-man stage show I'm desperately trying to keep on schedule. Honestly, I'm flattered. But I need you all to understand that I'm the only person behind this channel, and YouTube is brutal. Demonetizations, algorithmic suppressions, copyright strikes, failure to notify, and so many other things. Now, I'm not saying all this to complain. This is the world for every YouTuber today. That's just a fact. The point I'm getting at is that everything on this channel is done by me. So when I go all in on a video and it fails, that means I spent 2 to 3 weeks making it and I'm not going to get a return. meaning I'm never going to talk about that topic again because I literally can't afford to. It sucks. Relying on YouTube alone is dangerous. It's so inconsistent. So here is my ask of you. If you enjoy my videos and have the means to toss a few bucks my way, please do it by joining my Patreon. Having something reliable and steady every month as an artist is the rarest thing possible. The idea of Patreon is that you support creators you enjoy by tipping them. The hope is that I won't need to do a terrible Raid Shadow Legends ad to keep the lights on. Instead, it's awesome fans like you that toss in $1 or $2 and get rewarded back. If I can get enough support on Patreon, then I can work free of restrictions or worries when it comes to my content because I don't have to solely rely on YouTube. So if you have the means to do it, my Patreon link is in the video description. Please check it out and allow me to stop wondering where my next meal is coming from.